To the June 5th, 2024 meeting of the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing Settlement Policy. My name is Samir Canal. I'm filling in for Project Manager Billy Kaminsky today, who's out of office. I'm the Advisory Boards and Commissions Manager at the Community Safety Division. We'll pass it over to the co-chairs to get us started with the meeting.
Byron, go ahead.
Thank you, Kip. Byron Vaughn, co-chair of Settlement and Policy Subcommittee, also member of the PCCEP, Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, and I'm the other half with Kip Silverman. Kip.
Yeah, hi, Kip Silverman, the other half of the co-chair for the Settlement and Policy Subcommittee. I use he, him pronouns. And let me see who we have online here from PCCEP. Actually, I don't see any other committee members.
We have both Odelia and Devontae here. Odelia, would you like to?
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I can go. Hi, my name is Odelia Zuckerman. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the co-chair of the Community Engagement Subcommittee. And I'll pass it on to Devontae.
Thank you. My name is Devontae. I am a newly appointed member of the PCCEP. And yeah, that's about it. This will be my second meeting today. So thank you.
Thank you all. And if any of the city, PPB, DOJ folks would like to introduce themselves, please feel free to go right ahead.
I'll jump in. Hi, folks. Stephanie Howard, working here on behalf of the mayor's office tonight, and I'll pass it to Mary Claire.
Good evening, folks. Mary Claire Buckley, Portland Police Bureau. Nice to see you. And I don't know who else is there. Let's
got the chief.
Oh, whoops! That would be a faux pas, Beba. Chief Day.
Good evening, everyone. Bob Day with the Police Bureau, and Heidi, I'll turn it over to you. We can't hear you, Heidi.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. My name's Heidi Brown. I'm with the Portland City Attorney's Office, and I use she, her pronouns, and I work on the legal advice on the DOJ settlement agreement. It's nice to see you all.
I think we've got Officer Hansberger also.
Well, I just wanted to be here. Thank you, Stephanie. Good evening, everyone. Natasha Hansberger, Portland Police Bureau, Office of Community Engagement. Thank you. Good to see you, Canal. Mr. Canal.
And I see Brody as well as Jared Hager as well.
Hi, everyone. Brody Sargent, Interim Equity and Inclusion Manager of the Portland Police Bureau.
Anybody from? Everybody's been identified, I'm presuming, Samir?
I saw Jared.
Is he there?
Looking for one thing, yeah.
Maybe we lost him.
We'll be rejoined by him, and then also Leslie is here as well and dropped off and joining in a minute as well. He's a PCCEP member. We want to go back to the slides, please.
Hey, I just was having some connection difficulty. I'm Jared Hager. I'm with the Department of Justice. I just pulled into a garage, so I'll be headed up to my hotel room and logging back in. I'll go off camera, but I'm listening. Thanks for having me here.
Thanks, Jared. Co-chairs, if you'd like to pick back up, please.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. This is Leslie, a Spanish interpreter for today. I am not assigned yet.
Got it. Thanks. Co-chairs, do you want to do the community agreements today?
Yes. Thank you all for being here tonight. Community agreements: be okay with ambiguity, call out bias, ask questions to clarify, communicate directly, honestly, and respectfully, speak your own truth, respect the group, respect each other, assume positive intent, be present and open to new information and perspectives, share airtime, listen actively and respectively. Tonight, I'm sorry, we're going to have updates at 6:05. Then the reformation of the PPB rapid response team. We have invited some guests, which will be at 6:25. Then we have PCCEP and community Q&A at 6:55 and open public comment at 7:45.
Got 2 updates today. I think Byron, you have the first one and Kip the second.
Thank you, Samir. We've been working on this PCCEP forum on brain injury policing and public safety, which will be having on the 26th of this month at 6, which is a Wednesday, from 6 to 8:30. So we hopefully everybody can show up kind of a little early if they can possibly. We will have host speakers. We will have roundtable discussions about how this issues service in policing and public safety and how it can be improved upon. This will be an interactive event that builds on knowledge of community attendees. We encourage everyone with interest in policing and criminal justice reform, disability rights, and community safety to attend. And this is definitely going to be in person only. We're looking for volunteers. We got the speakers that we're going to show. Hopefully we got the speakers. There will be food. The place is fabulous. Melody Event Center place is really nice. I love it. As it says in this little brief statement, there will be tables for people to sit, maybe 4 or 5 people to a table. I'm just guessing that that's not a solid number. For everybody to sit there and interact, speak with each other, meeting of the minds in a sense. The attire for the night, you can come casual. A shirt and a tie is also okay. I mean, if you feel if you can, if you can, if you can't, you can't. I think that's it. This will be very educational, so bring a lot of pen and paper with you, please. That's it, Samir.
Go to Byron. It's a Kip. Sorry for this one. Yeah.
No worries. Looking for my unmute. So last week, last meeting, we talked about the PCCEP codification effort. We reviewed the draft code. We potentially will workshop it a little bit, and we will revisit the documents on July 10th on the next full committee meeting, and intend to hold a vote to approve the final version of the codification for the committee to deliver to Mayor Wheeler's office. So looking forward to getting that out there. And if there are any changes on a broad base, we can discuss them in meetings interim, but I don't expect any. So just need to finalize the language. Let's go to the next slide, please. So tonight we're going to talk about the Portland Police Bureau Rapid Response Team. I believe there's a new name for them, and I don't know what it is off the top of my head, so I apologize. But the background to the Rapid Response Team was a unit, I'll read to you guys, was a unit of about 50 officers who focus on crowd control and protest response. The team has been on hiatus since June of 2021. In March of 2024, City Council unanimously approved creation of a replacement unit called the Public Order Team. Thank you. There it is. Next slide. There we go. Thank you. So the background on the previous incarnation of this is, as everyone is likely aware, the protests during the summer of 2020 for racial equity and justice. There was a lot of criticism as far as the engagement tactics, the use of different types of munitions and responses. There was a coming out of that, there was an independent monitor report, which I believe was done by Independent Monitor LLC, that came up with a number of recommendations stemming from it. During that summer, there were a number of members of the rapid response team that expressed discontent about the way their work environment was impacted by the degree of public scrutiny and criticism. In the summer of 2021, Officer Corey Budworth was indicted on one count of fourth-degree assault, a misdemeanor, which was alleged to have occurred in August of 2020. The following day, all the other members of the rapid response team, approximately 50 in total, resigned from the team, still remaining as Portland Police Bureau officers, but effectively disbanding the team. The charges against Officer Budworth were dropped in July of 2023 after he publicly apologized to Terry Jacobs, the photographer he allegedly assaulted, as part of a restorative justice process. That, along with the independent monitor recommendations, is how we get to where we are today, with City Council voting to reinstate and offering a stipend for joining the team. Can we go to the next slide? And some of the framing questions we have that we'd like to get into, plus questions directly from the rest of the committee members and from the community, is why is the team being reformed? We just went through some of that. What will be different and improved upon from the former iteration? And what measures will be in place to make sure the team is accountable to the improvements that have been recommended in the independent monitor and from public input?
And can I just jump in on one thing before we go to the speakers? The term independent monitor is used in a couple different ways. There's a consulting firm whose name is Independent Monitor LLC, which was hired to issue a report, which was presented at City Council last August. That is separate from the role of independent monitor under the settlement agreement, which was just filled, I believe on May 15th was the date. It just happens to be their name of that firm. So.
Thank you for the clarification, Samir. So we have invited Chief Bob Day, the Chief Deputy City Attorney Heidi Brown, and of course Stephanie Howard from the Mayor's Office, who attends most of our meetings, to come talk to us about the plans for the newly reformed team. The format for this is I think we have about 25-30 minutes, if memory serves, from the agenda, for them to talk about the plans to recreate the team. Again, kind of talk to the issues, the broad issues that we brought up. And we won't be doing any interactive questions during that time, but please take notes and focus on the questions that you would like to ask. Once they're done with their presentation, we'll take questions from both the committee and the community members, and hopefully have some robust conversation. And I just want to remind everyone to what the community agreements are, so that we can have a fruitful and respectful conversation through this process. And with that, I will turn it over. I believe Chief Day will start the panel out.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for your service as a member of PCCEP. Certainly vital, important to that ongoing communication and relationship building between us and community. And you will probably, hopefully, not hear me use that terminology much anymore going forward. When I say us and community, I'm stressing within the organization that we are the community. One of the phrases we use is one bureau, one city, that, you know, we as a police department and as a police bureau are actually part of the community. Our actions have impact, have responsibility. And I really want to highlight the fact that I think that, you know, it's important that we recognize that we're in this together. It's certainly not lost on me, the role of policing and the authority we have. But just from an organizational standpoint, a community standpoint, I see us really as part of the community. So thank you once again for your service. Thank you for taking the time to discuss this really important topic. For those that don't know, just a little background on me, but I worked here in the police bureau from 1990 to 2019. And when I retired in 2019, I was the deputy chief. So 29-year career. And then spent about 4 years working in a variety of different areas. Spent some time as a policy advisor to Mayor Wheeler. I became heavily involved in the racial justice, social justice conversation around policing, criminal justice, and presented and spoke on that significantly up and down the West Coast with a lot of different private and public agencies. As well as advised and consulted on some behavioral health projects and their intersection with criminal justice and police. And then last fall, when Chief Lavelle decided to step down, I've known Chuck for many years. We're good friends. And when he approached me and asked if I would consider being part of this transition with him, and then the mayor asked if I would step in, and I was appointed as chief back in October of last year. So I'm really grateful to be back to try and help shepherd the police bureau through this season and into 2025 when we see this significant change in city government. I have a passion and a love for the police bureau and for the city of Portland. And I think there are many, many great opportunities we have ahead of us as a community to continue to build upon public safety, recognizing that safety is different for everyone, that the term safety doesn't necessarily apply or mean the same thing to everyone. But overall, I do think we have a common ground and a common desire to feel safe and to be safe in our community and in our public spaces and in our homes, et cetera. So I look forward to that partnership and doing that together over the last few months and going into next year as we also take on this new form of government. With that being said, a disclaimer, having not been here the last 4 years, I know that some of the conversation tonight might get into facts or areas that I'm not familiar with because I was not in the Bureau in 2020, 21, 22, or 23 until late into 23. So I'm glad and grateful to have Heidi Brown here and Stephanie Howard, who have been not only engaged with you folks, but engaged with the police bureau in the city around this process. So if there are areas where they want to jump in and correct the record or make sure that we're on track, I greatly appreciate that and welcome that. And there probably will be times we may have questions that, although I'm the chief of police and ultimately responsible for the organization and the direction going forward, certainly not lost on me that, you know, I can defer to them and their expertise and knowledge and experience as well. So I'm grateful for that. With all that being said, I noticed that we were sent a couple of 2 or 3 questions, and depending on how the co-chairs would like to go, we can kind of take them one at a time. I'm happy to speak to them individually. I have some thoughts, and then there might be questions off of that, or how would you like to proceed? You want me just to kind of work through the questions and see what comes up through that, or you want to kind of take them one by one?
I think the way we discussed this in the planning session was maybe you can work through the question, the 3 framing questions that we have, and kind of walk through that. And if there are any urgent questions, we can capture them in the chat. And once we're done presenting or answering those, we can open it up for further discussion. I think it might be the smoothest way to get through this.
And
Great.
if I could offer a suggestion, Chief, I think it might be helpful. I mean, Kip did a great job of kind of framing up the broad backstory, but I think to get us to the first question, I'm wondering if Heidi can't give us a little bit more about the recommendations that came from IMLLC as maybe a good launch pad to get into the specific questions. Would that be all right?
Yes, that'd be fine. Thanks.
Byron, that sounds good to you?
Yes, very much.
Okay, great, thanks. So I think as folks know, in 2022, in April of 2022, the Department of Justice and the city agreed to amendments to the settlement agreement, and the court adopted those at the end of April. And one of the requirements was that the city hire an outside entity to perform a critical assessment of 2020 and really look at the response by the city and the police bureau in particular during the protest events. And so we hired Independent Monitor LLC, which, as Samir noted earlier, gets a little confusing because we just agreed to an independent monitor under the settlement agreement to take over monitoring the city's compliance with the terms of the settlement agreement. So I'm going to refer to the outside entity as IMLLC. That way we all know I'm talking about the outside entity and not the newly hired independent monitor who's going to be overseeing compliance. So they performed a critical assessment looking at thousands of documents. I think it was like 500 hours of video or 500 videos. It was a lot of information. They came out a handful of times and they interviewed community members, PPB members, city officials. They spoke with other police agencies in the surrounding areas, and from all that, they put together their initial report, which we received a year ago, last August. That was publicly made available, and I think it was resent to members of the PCCEP in anticipation of this meeting tonight, and hopefully everybody at this meeting has access to that document. It is quite long, but what I want to just walk you through is that within that, the IMLLC made 12 recommendations. And one of those recommendations was that we create a new specialized public order team. And I do want to clarify one thing. Public order team is sort of the national term for referencing teams that are police who respond to public order events. And that's also known as protests, events, and so that's sort of the generic name. But I think the police bureau had decided to stick with the name of the rapid response team, and so that's still the name of the team, is RRT. But the IMLLC one of their requirements is that we create a new specialized public order team. And so, so that's in answer to your first question of why is RRT being recreated. That's because that was a strong recommendation from the IMLLC. And if you read their report, and I just reread it, one of the things they talked about is that in looking at national practices, the reason you want to have a public order team that specializes in this work is because they receive extra training more so than, thanks, Stephanie, just posted a connection to the report if anybody wants to see it. But the public order teams receive training above and beyond what most officers receive, and related to protest events and First Amendment rights, and how to police in the most effective way to ensure that community members' free speech rights are respected and maintained. And as part of that, there is extensive training that they go through. And there are national standards that have been adopted just in the last year or so, I believe, for the types of training that these officers who are engaging on these teams should engage in, best practices, things of that nature. And so the IMLLC, I think, took partly from those national best practices and standards and recommended to the city and to PPB that we follow a lot of those recommendations. So some of it was recreate the team, ensure that they go through certain training. And the IMLC said for a city the size of Portland that has the number of protest events that we see, and what they said in the report is that on average Portland sees about 250 protest events annually. So given that number, they said it is critical that Portland have officers who are specifically trained how to respond to protest events, understand First Amendment rights, and understand best practices and how to support those First Amendment rights while keeping the event safe from violence and property destruction. And so, so really, if you go through the report, and I don't want to go through and list out all the 12 recommendations they had, because I don't want to take up all your time. But if you go into it and go on to page 80, or if you're on the PDF of it, just go to the 90th page in the PDF, you'll see just a quick list of the 12 recommendations. So that's a brief overview. I'm happy to talk about it more, but I'd love to turn it back over to the chief to kind of get into the specifics around your questions.
Thank you, Heidi. So Heidi's correct. Reconstituting the team fills in a couple of gaps. Number one, it is a recommendation from the Independent Monitor LLC, and it is consistent with best practices across the country, especially for a city our size. I do want to highlight, certainly the focus on the team has been its response to protests and demonstrations. But the intent behind it when we formed originally and what we continue to want to see it evolve as is a team that is utilized in a variety of scenarios, not just around public protests or demonstrations, but more holistically. For example, if we had a major event that required evacuations, long-term perimeters, maybe if we had a significant train derailment, something where we had to work and partner with the Portland Office of Emergency Management and fire and et cetera. So there's a lot of information and studies to show that when you have a group of folks that have trained together, prepared, they have the equipment, they have the knowledge, and they're able to respond at a higher level and a more efficient level for a more sustained period of time. But obviously, there's a public order component to this as well. And as Heidi mentioned, Portland has a long-standing history and tradition of people expressing their First Amendment rights on a variety of different topics. Sometimes those have, resulted in violent outcomes, and sometimes those have required the intervention of law enforcement. So we want to have, members that have a greater degree of training and knowledge and experience around public order. And the reality is, an agency our size, it's difficult to get several hundred officers and keep them trained and equipped and skilled and prepared at the level we think they need to be. So creating a more concentrated group allows us to really focus on regular training and higher degree of accountability regarding their performance. So, specifically, why did we bring the team back? Is for some of those reasons. One, it's recommended in the report. Two, it's consistent with what we're seeing with other major departments around the country. Three, it does give us this opportunity to use the team in other manners for significant events that may occur in the city or the county or even in the region. Wildfires also come to mind. Sometimes when we have to do wide scale evacuations, et cetera, we can utilize them in that way. And then also just making sure that when we have opportunities to participate in protests or demonstrations, that we really have the best, well-equipped, well-trained, understanding folks to be able to manage them very complex situations. So that really kind of speaks to sort of the first question. I'd like to think a little bit about the idea now around, what will be different. I think that's where we can spend a little bit more time around what will be different. Well, since 2020, there have been several changes made, both in the legislature as well as, within PPB regarding our response to public order. So, the state legislature passed several laws in the wake of 2020 that now restrict the use of some of the tools that were used in the demonstrations that we all witnessed in 20 and 2021, specifically around impact munitions, pepper spray, and the use of tear gas, electronically amplified noise producing equipment, things of that nature that now have greater restrictions placed upon them about, when they can and cannot be used and the requirements that are needed. It's not that they are completely banned, but there definitely are more limitations and more oversight over when officers can use those in crowds and in protest situations. So that's a significant change because that is directed toward the whole state. That's not just, Portland specific. And because of that legislative action, that's carries a greater degree of accountability, in my opinion, because of the emphasis there. Speaking specifically to tear gas, we can only use that when we have a riot declared. There's certain illegal requirements to what a riot is and what meets that standard. It also has to be objectively reasonable. We have to be able to defend against a threat to life or serious physical injury. It has to be a dangerous, unlawful situation. These are just some of many of the aspects that have been put in place. It requires authorization from a commanding officer. There's a requirement that de-escalation be attempted. There's requirements now that there be minimum of warnings given, number of warnings given prior to. So I think on a state level, that the state of Oregon has taken some steps to try and modify the response of the team when engaging in public order events. So that's something that I think is significant. There's also been a change in our own policy. Our policy now mirrors much of what I just outlined in ORS. And once again, defer to Heidi as the legal expert if I've misspoken or not, but we have also made sure that our policies are in alignment with that. So there's an internal accountability as well. So we can make sure that we're holding our members to the state standard by both state law, but also by PPB policy. We've increased our amount of training time And so, we're really making an effort to be very intentional with the use of our time training, and time is very precious. And so we are making sure that we're trying to once again meet the best practices standards. There's the report that Heidi mentioned, the IMLLC gives a recommended hours of training to reach a high level or standard or expectation. And we're striving for that, building that into the curriculum so that we can meet those requisite number of hours. And confident that that increased amount of training and understanding, and that it will help us provide a better level of service. And the training isn't just around, use of force. There's many aspects of public order events that we want our members to be aware of, besides just, whether or not force can be used, but to understand many of the complexities that go in with them. We're talking and learning both nationally and internationally from experts around crowd theory, and not just, crowd actions, but really, how do we understand how crowds work, the intent, the messaging, the tone, the movement. We're really trying to be more informed and better educated on the crowd dynamics in general, so that we can respond appropriately, and that we don't, overestimate, overreact to something that maybe appears to be a threat or disruption, and maybe it's not. So just really trying to have an understanding there. We have been working with a new program. It's a program that we've had, but we formalized our dialogue liaison officers, DLO, and we've been utilizing them to do outreach with organizations before and during events. Recently, we had an event over in Northeast Portland, over in Holiday Park, and we utilized our dialogue liaison officers. They're out there. They wear a different type of uniform. They're clearly marked, and they're out just having conversations prior to these events getting started, making the police bureau available, gaining information about ways that we can facilitate or support some of these events. They do not want, the police to, participate in any way. Sometimes we can be helpful, blocking traffic or giving counsel or advice about routes or ways to go ahead and get their message heard. Years ago, we don't see that as much today, but there used to be several opportunities sometimes where people would want to have people arrested, and they would tell us ahead of time that we can. They would tell us ahead of time who wants to be arrested as an act of civil disobedience. We can facilitate that. We haven't seen that as much lately, but when we can have that kind of participation and cooperation, certainly significant. So we're using our dialogue officers to be able to do that outreach and to be available in the process. And we're hoping to be able to avoid prolonged standoffs, really focusing more on just criminal activity and violent activity, and that we'll be more prepared to respond to the things we need to, and be able to allow the community to move through their event safely without interruption or intervention by the police unless absolutely necessary. Some other areas that I think are going to be improved upon are around our force reporting, just being able to build in capacity to try and better account for our uses of force, greater use of supervision. Our current force policies under the supervision of the Department of Justice, they're very extensive, they're very comprehensive, and they apply very well when we have individual force actions. They're a lot more complex and cumbersome when it comes to public order events. So we're trying to manage to make sure that we are staying consistent with our policy and use of force reporting. And so we are, building in capacity for that, which includes additional supervisors and, gathering of information so that we can accurately report on the actions that we take. We are working closely with as many groups and folks that want to meet with us. And I would certainly encourage PCCEP to consider their network of relationships and, sitting down, having conversations. Really admire the standards that were set out at the beginning of this conversation, trying to adhere to the fact that, there's things that we can learn and things that we can, hear from one another and learn from one another. So we're meeting with activists, journalists, people with disabilities. We want to hear perspectives and know if there's ways that we can learn to work differently. I've personally been doing outreach to universities. I've been very involved in the conversation just around Portland State, for example, trying to make myself available. All of this is very much in line with our desire to, educate and learn from others, as well as to share the PPB, perspective and expectations and standards, so forth. So we have also developed a much more significant incident management team, where we now have better infrastructure built in to be able to manage these events. Prior to in 2020, certainly we weren't prepared for the prolonged nature of things. And, we wore folks out. We got tired. And we know when that happens, sometimes that can lead to poor decision making. And so we are intentionally creating teams to be available over a period of time, and then another team to be available to support that team, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's really important. We're reinvesting in our bicycle squad so we can have be more adaptable and be more flexible, using kind of a stair-stepped approach. I mentioned the dialogue liaison officers on the front end, being able to use them to do outreach. Also then being able to use the bicyclists to do outreach, maybe when the march is on the move or if the event is very fluid. The bikes allow that to get in there, have positive interactions, monitor, hopefully eliminating tension or friction points either between crowd participants or the police and crowd participants, and really utilizing the overall rapid response team with its formal gear to kind of as a last resort when all other methods fail, and we believe that life safety or property is at risk. So those are some other steps we're taking, along with just working with City Hall, elected officials, constantly trying to message and be consistent as a community. And it's a question I would have for us at some point this evening or down the road is, as a community, what are our expectations of one another as we show up at these events? Because we have seen the gamut where Portland has had 10,000 people in the streets and not had any issues, and we've had 500 people in the streets and we've seen millions of dollars worth of damage. So talking about what it is, how do we want to be known, how do we want to show up, how do we want to be seen as a community? And we're asking those questions of ourselves, and we're asking those questions of our electeds and other partners, community partners, to really try and create some understanding around that. So that's a little bit about sort of some of the things that are different. And I know there's also a desire to talk about accountability measures, but I just threw a lot at you, so I'm going to take a break there. And I know there's some questions in the chat, and I'll defer to the co-chairs if they want to address those now or later. And then Stephanie and Heidi, of course, feel free to build upon anything that I've shared or correct anything that I've shared.
There's one thing I can add, and you can find this in the IMLLC report, but there were changes to PPP directives that IMLLC noted that PPP made after the 2020 protests that addressed many of the concerns that were raised. So that was a positive. And there were also changes to PPP training. And again, in the report, you can see where IMLLC came out and observed a 2-day training, and they felt like, again, that the training really addressed a lot of the concerns. And then while I have the floor real fast, I'll just say, I know there was a question about intergovernment aid agreements, or what we call mutual aid agreements. And our office, in conjunction with PPB, has been in conversation with some of our nearby neighbors about at what point will they come in and support us, and how will we be there and support them for our law enforcement as different public agencies. And so that's another thing that's actively in process too. Sorry, Frida, I hope I didn't step on.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, I'll just go ahead and jump in here real quickly to give just a little bit of guidance. Hello, everyone. My name is Frida Davis, pronouns she, her. I'm a facilitator, and I'll be helping with the Q&A portion. Heidi, I don't know if you've had more you want to share in your time, but I do want to note that we wanted to try to get to the Q&A time no later than 7 p.m. so we can get community and PCCEP members voice in the space. But we also want to hear from you as well, Stephanie. So being mindful of that, I'm going to turn it back to you, Heidi, if you have anything else you'd like to share. And then if you could turn it over to Stephanie with our aim to wrap up this part of our Q&A, or this part of our session, by 7 p.m.
Great. I'll just answer Jake's question really fast about, since there was no RRT at the time, what was the training that IMLC observed? Good question. Thanks, Jake. What they observed was the training on force, the use of force policy. So there were extensive changes made to the use of force policy in 2021, around that period of time, 2022. And so there was a 2-day training on force, the use of force policy, and how that all works. And that's what IMLC observed. The only other thing I just really fast wanted to say, Jake, you also asked about steps that have been taken to hold officers accountable. And generally, I generally advise that we not get into specific disciplinary actions that PPB takes. And instead, I would just say that all complaints went through the process and were thoroughly considered, and there was corrective action taken where there were substantiated findings. And so that's probably the most that I would recommend that we say about specific discipline. And so I'm sorry to avoid that, but I hope that's at least somewhat helpful. Then I think that the chief could talk about what I think you also asked, would they be allowed back on the new public order team? And maybe instead what the chief could talk about would be what were the overarching considerations that were relevant when people applied to be on the newly formed RRT.
Right.
Yeah, I'll touch on that.
Yeah, let's hold on for a second there, Chief Day.
Yes.
When we wrap up this piece, I'll allow you to answer that, and then we'll jump into questions. Stephanie?
I actually don't have anything to say. I'm just here for support and to answer questions that come in my lane. So I'm happy to yield my time to the chief to speak to that question.
All right, excellent. Go ahead, Chief.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'll wrap up here with this, and we can get to the questions. In regards to, the recruitment piece, a couple of things. We asked for recommendations, from all their supervisors. So we made sure that, we had people buying in. I'm really big on owning your position and being accountable. If you're going to, recommend somebody, we did a thorough review of the internal affairs history. And there were some members who applied who were on the team previously who were not allowed to be back on the team. And then there were others that did apply who were on the team before who did. We have a total of about 50. And that includes sergeants, lieutenants, everybody total. I think that's about 40 officers and about 50 folks total. So, we followed a process that we believe was robust in vetting to make sure that we were bringing on folks that had, the right temperament about this. We were really encouraged by the interest of new members that expressed an interest and desire to be a part of this and to learn. And we actually had more people put in than we had spots for, so we were able to, I think, really try and hold a high standard for the people that are on the team.
Great. Thank you, Chief Day. So now we're going to enter a Q&A portion of our time together with our guests. And the way that this will go is that we're going to go ahead and prioritize PCCEP members' questions in here, but also we'll layer in community members' questions as well. If you have a question, I know there have been a number of questions that have been put in the chat. At this point, moving forward, we're really going to encourage you to go ahead and come off mute and speak your question into the space. It'll just be more helpful to track questions if folks are just adding their questions to the space as opposed to vocally as opposed to the chat. So we really appreciate your time. We're going to try to get through as many questions as possible. Please limit one question when it's your turn to speak. If you have a follow-up question or a second question and there are no other hands that are raised, then we will go to that. But let's do one question at a time moving forward. Okay, let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, thank you for the background and explanation, and thank you, Stephanie, for sharing some documents I hadn't seen. So I've been quickly scanning to try to feel like I'm better informed. But one of the I do want to give a good amount of time for the community to ask questions. So I'm going to limit couple of my questions. Also, I feel like this conversation is going to elicit more questions and deeper questions. So hopefully we can engage in the future and keep the conversation going, like you mentioned, Chief Dave. So thank you for that. I think the one that's on top of mind is in the IMLLC report. They had mentioned that the declaration of unlawful gathering or riot declaration, I forget the terminologies that were identified in the report, had been used rather liberally, and in some cases it may have met the general accepted criteria for it, but many times it had not. I was wondering if there's been a change to that policy as to who declares an escalated state, and B, what that criteria is and if it has changed at all.
Okay, I've got a couple thoughts on that, but Stephanie, I want to know if you've got a response. Excuse me, Heidi, ahead of that, in regards to quoting from the report, and I know that you generated a response to the report, so I don't know if you have something specific around that, and then I can chime in on it. I think primarily around the legislative changes, which now, like I said, our policy mimics those. But Heidi.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that the declarations, I think what you're referring to, Kip, was the declarations of unlawful assemblies. And there was reference more to that than the declaration of a riot, because actually PPB's policy on declaration of a riot is a little bit, not a lot, but is stricter than what the state law requires. So under state law, a riot is at least 5 people engaging in tumultuous and violent behavior. There's a little more to it, but that's the gist of it. Under PPB policy, it's more, it's 6 people or more, engaging in that behavior. And then unlawful assembly is a state-defined terminology. And so as a result of that, I know that, I'm trying to remember what happened back at that time, but I know that the directors were clarified, and there are restrictions on when an unlawful assembly is declared, et cetera. And I think if I remember right, Kip, that the report talked about that PPB declared an unlawful assembly pretty regularly in June, and that as the time went on, you saw that decreasing. And I think part of I think part of what was reflected in that was PPB learning what was working and what was not working. Because part of what IMLLC was saying was that, look, sometimes that's not the solution, and the actions you need to take are different. Which is part of what their recommendations are, is to find some different ways to respond, seek out the people who are actually, if you can, engaging in violent behavior, target them and send in plainclothes or undercover officers to actually make those targeted arrests, thus allowing everybody else to continue to engage in peaceful protests. The only other thing that I want to comment on about that too is the other thing that we really recommended that's been a challenge for us because of state law is the use of video. You'll see that in their report, as they twice in their report talked that they were shocked at the restrictions that that exist in that under state law, and that they just felt that usage of video and command being able to see what was going on with the crowd, to see who's actually engaging in violent behavior, helps them to allow more people to continue to protest peacefully, but arrest the people that are actually engaging in violent behavior that becomes more damaging either to other people or to property. We'll have body cameras now, so that's going to be helpful too. So that's another big change, and something that I know IMLC was hoping for. So hopefully that helps.
Quickly, Kim, I want to just add to that and then make sure we got your question answered, is that the body worn camera piece is going to be significant. I didn't mention that earlier. And going back to the unlawful assembly, I think this is why we've been spending this great deal of time, both with our dialogue officers, but also with the fact that that we also will be doing more understanding of that crowd dynamic, crowd theory, right? And I think we were catching on, as what I've read and heard, as 2020 went along, that maybe we don't have to be so quick to declare that, but have a different approach. And this stair-step approach with dialogue officers, bicycle officers, et cetera, might prevent a quicker escalation to unlawful assembly or riot. That's what I'm hoping and intending for. So I hope that answers your question, Kip.
It's a good start. Thank you.
Adelia?
Yeah, I was wondering if anyone could speak to the 6% raise that was offered to these officers who were potentially going to join, and why and how that is happening. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So the Police Bureau has several different units that have specialized training. These are members that apply for, much like RRT, but other programs as well. They apply for and they're put into units, and the additional pay is to compensate them for taking on additional responsibility, as well as developing a greater level of expertise and proficiency. So this was not uncommon. It's consistent with other practices with other units that we had. And we believe that, we should recognize that. And one of the ways that we can do that, obviously, is through a financial incentive. So it wasn't specific to this team. It's consistent with what we've done in the past with other units in the Bureau, and we still have.
All right. Byron?
Thank you, Frida. I really didn't have a question, Chief Day. You really perked my ears up when you said safety is different to everyone. That meant so much to me, and I appreciate you for saying that, because safety is different to everyone. Safety is different to everyone going home, going to work, going to the grocery store, picking their kids up, having fun after night on the town, going down to the waterfront. I really appreciate you for saying that, and thank you for saying that. I haven't read the report, so I don't have any questions. So, but I do appreciate you being here, and I will get into this report, and hopefully something will come of it. Thank you, though.
Well, thank you, Byron. And I'd love to have that conversation with you over a cup of coffee or something, because that's something that I'm just been learning in the last few years. Unfortunately, for the most of my career, I thought that, how I thought and interpreted safety was how everybody should have thought and interpreted safety. And as a law enforcement professional, that definitely poses some risks to it. So, one of the things I've learned from the author, David Brooks in the New York Times, he says that humility is recognizing a lot of what you don't know, realizing there's a lot you don't know and realizing what you do know is probably largely wrong. So if there's a chance for us to connect, I'd love to go into that a little bit more. So thanks for recognizing that.
Most definitely. I appreciate the offer. I will.
Dr. Silver?
Yes, thank you. My question is for the chief. You mentioned Portland State, and as we all know, there were some recent protests at Portland State. And my question is, was it this new team that has been put together who responded to the protests and to the demands of the and need of the university? How do you think it went? What force was used? And were there any complaints about police resulting? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Silver. So I'll be able to be a little specific on some and a little vague on others. I just don't have the details, but I'm happy to get those to you. But this was not the team that was at Portland State. We're still in the process of developing and training that. So they're not online at this point. So we were using, we call it our mobile field force. Essentially, those are our, routine police officers who do receive a degree of training throughout the year on mobile field force and on crowds and on force, et cetera. But these are officers that we pull from, the precincts from day-to-day patrol. There were some incidents of force used. There were a limited number of arrests. I believe there's been a few protests, but the most significant one with the library, I think, was on May 2nd. I think we had 31 arrests in that case. District Attorney's Office issued on 27 of those 31 cases. So there were some incidents in force used in that regard. If there were complaints made, they haven't made it through the system yet. In other words, they still are probably, being reviewed by the independent police review. And so, anything that's come in, obviously we're going to be looking to see where the team can maybe start to step into some of these in the coming months, but I'm not sure how long it's going to take before we're comfortable doing that, because we want to make sure that, everybody's prepared, and we know there's going to be a great deal of scrutiny and expectation around their performance, as there should be with any officer on any event that we do. So I don't want to too much distinguish or highlight just this team. I know we're talking about it, but I want this group to know, my expectation is for all members of the Bureau, including myself, to continually striving to work, within policy training, provide service to the community. So that's a little bit. You asked if I felt like it went well. I will tell you that I was encouraged by the relationships that formed through this, in particularly with President Cudd. And prior to any events happening in Portland, I recognized what was happening around the country, and I reached out to university presidents. So I happened to meet with President Cudd a couple of weeks before there was a demonstration there. I met with the president of Reed. I've met with the president of University of Oregon, the president of University of Portland. I've just greeted with the president of Lewis and Clark, hoping to connect with her soon. I really see a huge opportunity here to have discussion both this spring, but also early fall, with leadership on the university campuses and their students. We know the students have a lot of energy and a lot of desire to express themselves, and there's certainly enough causes in the world that warrant that expression. So I'm trying to bring together university leadership, faculty and students, and police, just to kind of talk about expectations and understanding and see if there's some groundwork we can lay around those relationships, anticipating that universities may be a site for activity in the fall if we have more acts of civil disobedience or just free speech events, whatever they might be.
Thank you, Chief.
Kayla?
Hello and good evening. I just wanted to ask if there was going to be a public order assistance model for protests or any other crisis events.
Are you talking about mutual aid assistance? Kayla, I saw your comment in the chat.
Oh, no. So just recently took a class in a mass casualty incident and they set up a family assistant model or call center basically to help those who are impacted in areas or by events such as like floods and stuff. So I was wondering if there was going to be a public assistance model for residents or anyone that needs to call and just talk about if they're seeing something or just need any kind of support or help during these times or events, if that kind of makes sense.
It does make sense. I don't know that we have that planned, but I like the idea, and it sounds like something that we can all talk about on our end. It's an interesting idea, so thanks for sharing it.
Joelle?
Hello. So I apologize. I came in a little bit late, so I'm sorry if this two-part question is a bit redundant. But when speaking with Portland Police BIOs, they said of the 50 RRT members, 39 are returning and 35 were on that 2021 group that did walk out on the job following, yes, nightly protests, but also the announcement of criminal charges against Corey Budworth. My question for the chief is, if PPB is ensuring in this new contract with this raise that officers won't be able to walk out on the job, and then also in the interest of transparency, will you be releasing the names of the new officers on this team?
Yeah, so there's nothing I'm aware of in the contract that binds them to, stay on the team. I don't know that we're able to do that. Once again, city attorneys on here has got a lot more experience in labor law, but I can't think of a role or assignment that we have other than, the basic response. I mean, if there isn't a team, we're still going to show up at these events, as we've been doing since the team disbanded. And I know that there has been a request for the names, or somebody mentioned something to me about that. And so I've also sent that over to the city attorney's office for review so that we're consistent with how we release information. It's not about whether or not I want to or should. I want to make sure we're consistent in how we're doing that and how we've done it in the past. And because I'm new to this process, I'm just waiting for some information to come back. Once I get direction from the city attorney's office, and that'll give me clarity about what my options are around releasing the information, those names. So
I'd say, generally the chief has a right to assign people and tell them what work they're doing, throughout. But I think one of the considerations that I know the chief has mentioned to me at times is that who do you want on a team? If you have people who are no longer interested in being on a team, are those the best people then to have there? And so I think that now, having set up a much better support for people that will be on the team, the training is going to be more extensive than it was in the past, and consistent with the national standards. And so hopefully at all levels, both for the community and for the officers, there's the right support so that they do the best job possible when they're engaging with, when they're doing their work, when there's a protest event.
And I see some comments in the chat about the recommendation from the IMLLC around transparency. I agree. And I know that we're working with our comms teams and other leaders to, have that formal public introduction piece. So all that's still coming together in terms of schedules and people, but I can say that that's definitely in the works. And hopefully we'll have the question answered, around names and et cetera, once again, so we can be consistent in that. Thank you.
Odelia?
Yeah, thank you. I guess while we're on the topic of picking it back a few folks on the topic of the ongoing protests at PSU, I just wanted to bring up something that Chief Day, I believe you said at a press conference around a month ago, just about like taking people into custody and using that as a tool of like leverage to gain information, which feels kind of like an intentionality around arresting people for like just gaining information. And I was wondering if like that's going to be kind of put into practice by this team as well, particularly because we've seen arrests even for things such as like jaywalking. And I think like the ideas of safety and protecting community, I think it's important. Like, I don't know, I'll stop talking, but yeah, if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Sure. So I've done a few press conferences. I don't know specifically what you might be referring to, but I'll try and give a general response so you can tell me if it hit the mark or is adequate, because I do want to answer your concern. But we don't arrest people to leverage. My intent was to talk about the fact that, I believe there is a distinction between First Amendment and free speech and criminal behavior. And people, when they engage in criminal behavior, officers have discretion to make arrests, regardless of, the level of that criminal behavior. Officers have that discretion. And if if it rises to the point of where we believe it does impact, life safety, vandalism, violence, et cetera, then I do want our officers to step in and intervene, which may in fact lead to arrest. Information gained from that arrest is, going to be used typically as it would for any ongoing investigation. But it's not a matter of, directing our officers to arrest people for leverage. It's to be consistent around our effort to provide that, public space where people can express themselves. And that's what makes these events so complex. Excuse me, is the reality that there's many competing points of views, and there's a variety of different behaviors that occur. And I really see the role and the responsibility of the police to be able to promote and support those. I mean, one of the things that the law provides all of us, and it certainly has not been applied fairly and justly throughout our nation's history or even here in the city of Portland, but one of the things that it applies for all of us is a level of predictability and consistency. And, when I drive down the road, I stay in my lane because I believe that somebody else is going to stay in their lane. And by staying in our lanes, we're able to travel freely. By stopping in intersections, we're able to avoid accidents. So, there is a purpose behind the laws that we have. Once again, recognizing though that they're not always and have not always been applied fairly and equitably and justly. But my passion and goal is that we do use good discretion and that we are lawful in our actions and our intentions. So would not be an expectation of mine that we do that just to leverage somebody's position or belief or for purposes of information.
Yeah, I think the press conference was on May 8th where you were referencing the May Day protest. That's the video that I watched. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that.
Devontae, go ahead.
Hello. So I didn't have a chance to read the entire report, but you did mention a bit about being shocked about the extent in which the state law restricts officers' ability to record or use recordings to identify individuals that may be deemed to be engaging or inciting criminal activity in what could be peaceful gatherings. Can you elaborate more on some of those challenges? To me, it seems a bit of a moot point with the implementation of the body-worn cameras. Can you talk a little bit more about what the intention or the plan or your policy might be for the body-worn cameras? Are officers going to have those on for the entirety of their shifts, or is it going to be just when they have suspicion or reason to believe that there may be criminal activity going on? Just wanted to know if you could speak a little bit about that.
If I can respond to that, just to be really clear, when I was referencing the shock, I was quoting from the IMLLC's report. What they say is on page 69 of their report, they say, as noted above, we have worked in various cities in the United States and were shocked by the near total lack of video downtown in 2020. And so, and then you'll see it, I think there's once more where they also make that same reference. So it wasn't, I wasn't saying that the city was saying we were shocked there was no video, because we're familiar with the laws in Oregon. It was the IMLC and what they're used to in other jurisdictions, and how video, they feel, commented on that they felt video can be helpful in ensuring there are targeted arrests on protesters who then engage in riotous behavior and are violent or destroying property, and being able to separate and distinguish them from all the other protesters who are peacefully protesting. And they saw that as a way to avoid use of tear gas and other munitions that impact, a broad number of people rather than the specific folks engaging in behavior that's criminal. So I just want to be really clear about, I was just quoting from the report. And then so the state law, there's a state law that Dan Handelman wrote. He put it in the chat. It's ORS 181A 250, and it talks about ensuring that police are not recording, video recording people engaged in political activities. And that's a very important law, and ensure that we follow. And the exception that's allowed under that law is that if they have reasonable suspicion to believe that a person is engaging in criminal activity, that at that point they can record. And so that would be that, and then the body camera law, which is ORS. I don't know why I'm blanking on it today. I think it's 173674, but I'll double check and I'll put it in the chat. That one also talks about when body cameras must be activated, and it's when an officer has probable cause or reasonable suspicion to believe a crime or violation has occurred, is occurring, or will occur. I think it's what it says. So that's the law that we're working with, and that would apply. Those two laws are the ones that apply and would apply to body cameras.
Yeah, I think that's, I'm happy that that's being implemented. I do think that, obviously the First Amendment is incredibly important, but I think that the cameras do help keep both, public citizens accountable, but it also keeps law enforcement accountable. So hopefully that helps to avert some of those uses of force that we've seen.
That's right. That is part of the recommendation from IMLC, was that it is an accountability tool, so that if a complaint comes in, then we have body camera footage to help and identify where somebody is violating policy or state law. The body cameras will really help with that. And I think that's one thing that has been effective in other jurisdictions, in finding out when officers have violated policy or law and being able to hold them accountable, because you have the evidence.
All right, Jake.
Yeah, my question is, the past training for the rapid response team was found to have included materials that were problematic and also included materials from white nationalists and violent extremists. And I'm wondering, to respond to that and to be more transparent to the public, if the training materials for the rapid response team are going to be made available for perusal by PCCEP or by the community to specifically respond to the previous inclusion of problematic and harmful material.
Go ahead,
Dan,
Heidi, if you want.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment though, I don't know if folks, the city publicly released the disciplinary action that we took as a result of the slide that was included, that white supremacist abhorrent slide. And just to be clear, that the evidence that we found in the investigation was that attendees didn't see it. There wasn't any evidence that anyone had seen that slide, and it was taken down very quickly. But we do have we made sure that everybody understood as soon as that incident occurred that all trainings must go through the training division, where we have both the captain of training reviewing and the new dean of education, the director of police education. She's the person we hired. That was one of the other amendments to the settlement agreement we made with the Department of Justice as a result of 2020, was to hire a civilian expert on adult education, and that's what she does. And so between the two of them, they review all trainings that are done. And I think previously there had not been a consistent practice with specialty units submitting their training. And subsequent to this incident, it was a bureau-wide email was sent out to make sure that everybody understood that all training must go through that. So I think we've done all we can to ensure that that will not happen again. Certainly nobody wants that to happen.
All right. Barb has offered for Dan Handelman to go next, so I'll go ahead and call on you, Dan.
Oh, thank you. This is Dan Handelman, use he, him pronouns, with the group Portland Cop Watch. Chief Day, we've known each other for a very long time, so I hope you understand the place I'm coming from when I'm bringing this comment and question to you. So first, the comment is, it was very clearly written in the directives that the new team first was going to be called the Public Order Unit, and then we pointed out that that would be pronounced POO, and it was changed to the Public Order Team. And now it's being stated that you're changing the name to Rapid Response Team, which makes it seem like the general public who is not happy with the Rapid Response Team will not trust them no matter what you do because you're using the same name. So that's my statement. My question is, last Wednesday, a testifier who wasn't from Portland Cop Watch said they were at a PSU protest where the Portland police corralled people into an alleyway and then nearly got run over by a right-wing protester who didn't like their message. And the protesters managed to stop the car before it hit either them or the police. And in response, your boss, the police commissioner, Mayor Wheeler, said, well, you were being told to clear out the area, and if you didn't do that for an hour, then you shouldn't whine, cry, and complain when something like that happens. Is that something that was taught to the squad that was there and will be part of the rapid response team, that people who don't disperse shouldn't whine, cry, and complain? Because that is not anything but passive resistance when they refuse to disperse. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah. Once again, good to hear from you. As you said, we've known each other a long time. So that response from Mayor Wheeler, I'm not familiar with. And, certainly we're going to stay within the boundaries of what our policy and what law allows. So in that particular case, I can't speak the specifics off the top of my head, but, the mayor certainly speaks for himself. And make sure that I'm going to make sure that the team and the police bureau responds appropriately in all the different situations that we face.
All right, Barb.
Hi, thank you for being here to answer our questions. I'm wondering, and it doesn't need to be at this meeting, because a visual of a timeline for where you are in terms of training and approval of training materials and when the training would actually take place and be done, etc., would sort of have been really helpful in this presentation. And I'm wondering if we can get something, a visual of that at some point. Thank you.
Yes, I made a note of that. That's a good comment, and apologize for not having that. But yeah, we can certainly get something together and share it with PCCEP here.
I would note that the state that certifies police officers has a training now for public order teams, and I know some members of PPB went to that training. I think it was just in the last month. I don't have a lot of the details on that, so I'm sorry. And as Chief Day, we can look into that for you, but I do know that much about it.
All right, Jared.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief Day. Nice to see you. And thanks everyone for your comments and being here. I had a follow-up question to what Odelia asked, and I guess Chief Day, your response to Odelia referenced the discretion that officers have to make arrest when there's probable cause that they committed a crime, and I think that's undoubtedly true. My question is, what does the Bureau have in mind to ensure that the discretion that officers have is exercised without regard to the viewpoint of protesters? So, for example, I think, in our Louisville investigation at the Department of Justice and our Minneapolis investigation, we found some evidence that when police encounter protests about police, sometimes the discretion that officers have is exercised in a different way than if they encounter, climate kids protesting, and, whether that's because there's a perception of it being more dangerous or maybe there is more actual danger. But is there like a systemic review of responses by particular officers or units or to events to ensure that the discretion that officers rightfully have is exercised without regard to the viewpoint of protesters?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jared. I'm glad you highlighted that. A couple of things, just personally. I mean, it's just imperative that we, remain neutral in our response. That our service is for all, so that we cannot, get influenced or, be influenced, I guess, is just the thing about that messaging. And when I was leading these events years ago, particularly when they surrounded, a particular topic, I would oftentimes spend time at the beginning of the briefing with the officers speaking and doing, hey, this is what this is about. This is what we need to be, aware of. This is the messaging that's probably trying to be accomplished. So I think one of the things, we need to do a better job, and we are doing this in my conversations with the leaders and the incident managers for these things, to understand that there's value in what is being said. And we just had this conversation literally yesterday with some of the senior leaders, and about how I don't want to be dismissive, even if we don't agree either with the actions or even with the message, but there's something there for us to hear and to learn and listen to. In a formal way, every event that we do has an extensive after action process. And, one of the things that we certainly learned in 20 and 21 is, being more in tune and aware of our own processes and procedures and following our policies and practices, so that if we start to see patterns or responses that are inconsistent, we can get on them sooner and earlier. That we can definitely, look at, we had an event about this, we had an event about this, we had a group that represents this point of view, we had a group that represents this point of view. How did we show up? How did we respond? Going back to earlier, the conversation around crowd theory, right? Were we quicker to announce a public order, I just lost the term, not riot, but that lower level one. Are we quicker to announce that with this group than we were maybe with this group? And why is that? Why is that the case? Maybe it's justified, maybe it's not. So through the after action process, we're going to be doing that. And then also, the report, the independent report, emphasized the role and the significance of senior leadership from the chief of police on down to be present and engaged in these events. So, for example, on the day that we were heavily involved with PSU, I was here, I was working, I was, being kept abreast, and then later in the day went up and, saw what was going on and, made myself present and available. And now we're in that process of debriefing and learning and reviewing all the time. So that's a great point. I'm very sensitive to that. It's critical that we demonstrate neutrality in all of these that we show up in.
Leah?
Hi. My question is specifically, how will you make officers follow the law, knowing the many, many incidents where they put hands on people and didn't do the paperwork, knowing the many, many incidents where they've lied to minors to get a confession and that is now illegal, etc. Like, specifically, how will you make them obey the law?
Well, obedience to laws and procedures and policies is a basic tenet of what we do. And those that don't will be held accountable either through the legal system or through the internal discipline system of the police bureau.
And one thing that we didn't have in 2020, as I mentioned, is we've got body cameras coming back. And so if there's a point where an officer is using force on a community member during a protest event, then that would be an incident where they would need to be recording. And so we'll have a record of that. So that's the kind of thing that I think, hopefully will help ensure that officers are following the law and are held accountable if they're not.
That doesn't appear to be happening now.
We don't, I can't answer whether that is or isn't, but what I can say is we don't have body cameras yet. And the plan is to roll them back out. We did a pilot program last fall with about 60 or 70 officers. And then now it'll be rolled out bureau-wide. And so should be, I think that body cameras should be out in the fall in full, I believe, or the end of the summer, early fall is, I think, what the plan is. Just making sure people are trained again on the body camera and that folks who haven't used it before get that training.
And so what will you do in the meantime?
I think we could just use the processes that we currently have, sure that, we rely on people. If somebody feels that an officer violated either law or policy, that please file a complaint with either the independent police review or with internal affairs. Either one is fine. But please file a complaint if you're concerned, because the only way that we can look into it is if somebody lets us know that there's a problem. And the other thing I would note too is that, another thing that was adopted after 2020 was that officers went through ABLE training, which is active bystander sorry, it's active bystandership for law enforcement, I think. But the purpose of that is to really train officers to step in and intercede if you see another officer engaging behavior that is either coming up to the line or especially crossing the line. So that is another thing that the Bureau did subsequent to 2020 and training that they've done and that they continue to provide. But I mean, you know, the best we can do is-
appreciate that.
Sorry.
It is good that there is like a process now, but like I would like to tell you a situation where the process is not going to work. So in 2020, I was peacefully protesting outside of a police department and I got beat up by 3 police officers. I have missing time because I was, you know, hit and I fell to the ground and my brain shut off because it couldn't handle that anymore. And when I stood up, I was still being physically assaulted, but told to get up and move. And this protest was peaceful, but they didn't like us there. And so even though we were following their directions, they shoved another person into me and my friend so that we would fall down. I am saying all of this to say, even if I report it, nothing is going to come of it because I have no DPSST number. I have no face. I have no name. I just have the harm. So how can I make that report knowing that and experiencing that while also knowing that when those reports are made, there is corruption involved and they are not given to the folks that need to see them. So I know everybody's trying to be nice here, and that is great to come to a solution, but folks are protesting a genocide, and so things may get a little hairy, and the process to hold the police accountable is not effective, and the part of the process is to come in the fall. Like these all kind of fall short of what is desperately needed.
Say is one that if you file a complaint with independent police review, they are outside of the police bureau. They're a separate office, a separate entity, and they have their own authority and power to do an investigation. And I would also say that they spent hundreds and hundreds of hours scouring the internet for videos, etc., to try to identify officers in instances where complaints were made and the person didn't know the identification of the officer. So I would still encourage you to at least file a complaint with them. And then the other piece I can tell you is that there was another state law change that requires kind of large lettering so that it's more visible, like in the nighttime and during protest events, so that it would be easier for a person to identify who the officer is, even in a situation, or hopefully, you know, easier to identify an officer in a situation like you're describing.
Right.
So hopefully there have been changes that would help with that, even between now and the fall when the body cameras are fully full.
Thank you for that. I just want to urge you to do even more. I guess that's all.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So these are going to be the 3 final hands we'll take for this section, and then we'll be moving to open public comment. Kip?
Yeah, I just had a quick question, then I'll get out of the way. Two dates, if this can be dialed in for us, is when do we expect for the rapid response team to be formally announced and introduced, and be in play? And the other question is, have we dialed in a date on the body worn cameras yet, as well?
The formal introduction of the team, and I know there's been some discrepancy around whether it's the whole team or you know, an introduction about who the team is, and then as the team forms. So I know that we're in the planning stages of trying to do some of that introduction piece. I don't know that that has been finalized, but we're trying to make that happen sooner than later. I would say within the next couple of weeks. In terms of the team itself and, you know, the interpretation of, you know, whether we have 40, 50, you know, officers stand in one place or whatever, that's still to be discussed. I don't have any thoughts about that. And then the body worn camera project, cameras will start being reissued to Central Precinct where we're done with a pilot earlier in the fall, and those are going to go out in the next couple of weeks, and the goal is to have them bureau-wide by September. So they'll be going out to Central Precinct, and then each of the precincts. There's additional training that has to go along with each one, but Central Precinct is going to just get the refresher because they've already used them for 90 days.
Fantastic, thank you.
Devontae?
So I was kind of looking over some of the information regarding, this is a follow-up question to the topic of the body worn cameras. I was looking up some of the information about the rollout of the implementation of the cameras, and I was wanting to, I guess, clarify or seek clarification on, are the officers are going to have to activate these cameras manually under a circumstance that requires them to do so. What is the policy going to be for when an officer has not activated the camera as they should have, or if a camera goes dark when it should be activated? Is there going to be a no tolerance policy for that? Obviously, everybody makes mistakes, but you know, in the event that something happens, something unsavory happens that should have been recorded, but isn't because the camera went dark. I mean, have we talked about that? About what the repercussions of that would be? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you. So the policy does require times when they're, you know, are required to activate it. For example, when they arrive on scene, there's some things that are automatic where the camera activates automatically as it connects to Bluetooth, like when they turn on their overhead lights, or if they draw their firearm. I believe if they draw their taser as well. There is a grace period as the cameras roll out, where if you know, there's officers fail to follow the policy around the proper turning on, reviewing, storage, whatever, you know, we're going to use that as a time of teaching time and instruction time because it is going to be new. But you know, we're also going to make sure that we don't see, you know, patterns. Of grace time doesn't mean, you know, every time you go out you get to, you know, accidentally forget this or forget that. So but at the end of that, you know, 60-day period, obviously we have you know, internal discipline processes we can use for violating policy, and it'd be an expectation that they adhere to it. I mean, you know, the benefit we have is coming to this late is that we have a lot of agencies and a lot of places to look to that have implemented body worn cameras already, some very successfully, some maybe not so well. So we have a lot of information out there that we can pull from to try and really make sure that we're consistent with the best practices across the country with this technology.
Okay. Barbara? Barbara, you're on mute.
Sorry. Barbara Wyszynski, she, her. So thank you for this very interesting discussion. In the past, the police have acquired military weapons and vehicles, I believe. And I'm wondering, is that increasing, decreasing? You know, I mean, even the fact that a officer has a automatic weapon, what, an AK or AR-15 in their car, just sitting there in general, and then at these demonstrations, how much military gear is used? And is that, like I say, are you trying to get rid of that stuff, or are you buying more, or what? Thanks.
Yeah, there was a policy, and Heidi, I don't want to put you too on the spot because my memory is foggy on this, but there was something in place even before I left where we discontinued the purchase of military surplus and so forth. And now there's a requirement that we go before council for purchases of specific items. So, you know, we're not buying ex-military equipment. And then for specific ammunition and specific items, we have to go before and get council approval. So there is some oversight for that now.
Thank you.
All right. At this time, we'll go ahead and move to open public comment. We want to thank our guests for being present and responding to the questions that the community and this committee had for us. And now open public comment is open at this time. This is an opportunity to ask to make any comments about anything that was discussed today, or any questions or comments about any of PCCEP's business from previous meetings or future meetings coming up. You know, it's also a place to share what you would like to see PCCEP work on next, and any additional comments or questions you might have for the committee. So we'll go ahead and open the floor right now, just as we did in the past Q&A space. Just raise your hand and we will get to you. Dan? Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, sorry. I usually don't mute myself on the computer. I was trying to be polite today. I use a telephone for my audio. So anyway, so you all, PCCEP agreed that you were not going to talk about the Police Bureau's annual report draft, that comments are due next Monday, the 10th. So I'm going to just kind of run down a couple of points that I think you should think about bringing up. Now, remember that one of the main things that it says in the settlement agreement that has to be discussed with the public when the report is put forward is pedestrian and traffic stops and bias-free policing. There is no section at all in this new report for the Strategic Services Division who publishes the traffic stops data. So there's not even a mention of the traffic stops data in the report this year. The chief has said that transparency and accountability are among his goals, not the main three, but among them. And the report does not talk about the outcomes of any internal affairs investigations, how many times officers might have been disciplined or found out of policy. That is consistent with previous years, but it just doesn't seem to fit the transparency model or the accountability model. The report said last year that there were 27 unplanned separations, and this year it doesn't say anything about unplanned separations, which I think means when people get fired. There was, as usual, very insufficient coverage of the 4 times police shot and killed people last year, including the fact that 2 of those people were Black people, and the police had not shot any Black members of the community since January 2019 until November 2022, and then they shot 4 in the course of 13 months and killed 3 of them. There's also very little information about use of force, which is another thing that's required by the settlement agreement to be part of the discussion of the annual reports. Then there's like a very vague mention about neighborhood response teams addressing more than 700 camps within the city, which I think probably means they helped sweep houseless people who have nowhere else to go, but it's used a very vague terminology. So these are some of the things that we found in the report, and we're probably going to write a longer commentary to send out before Monday, but I'm hoping that you all will take a look at it and call some of that stuff to the Bureau's attention, because they don't listen to us And I know they take some a while sometimes, but they are more likely to listen to you all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Any other comments?
I got one, Frida. I'm tired.
Noted, Byron.
Yeah, if there's no other comments, I just want to say, I know these conversations can be challenging, and I appreciate Chief Day and Heidi and Stephanie for being here, and Jared and all of you have shown up and asked great questions. I'm sure there'll be more questions to come, so hopefully we can continue this discussion down the road. And please contact us with thoughts and questions as they come up through our email address on the website.
Please, we need
Yeah.
everybody's information. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. I just want to go ahead and make sure we call on Jake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no worries. I just wanted to, call out, we mentioned it again, not to require a comment again, but the repeated statements from the city and from the Bureau is that, like, we're going to be transparent, we plan to be transparent, we will be transparent. But, tonight is another example that when community members are asking questions like, who's on the rapid response team? Oh, we don't know when, we'll let you know. Can we have information about the training slides? Oh, we're not sure if those will be available. And when people are showing up, like myself and others, with substantive questions, the response is kind of always obfuscating to a future date. And that this is a pattern of behavior of showing up and asking, and the specifics are responded to very, there isn't transparency. So when we say we're committed to transparency and we're committed to accountability, and we ask which officers were held accountable, the response was, we're not going to answer that. When we say, can you tell us who's on the team? We're not going to answer that. And so we're to the point of saying, like, this is a moment to say transparency can happen tonight. It's not happening. Accountability can be happening all of the time. Tonight is an opportunity. So there's not an answer, but to Leah's comments and questions, either saying, instead of saying accountability will come when we launch body cams in the future, or accountability will come at another time, to say, like, when are we going to say accountability should have happened 20 years ago, it should have happened 10 years ago, it should have happened 5 years ago. But it seems like we're constantly kicking the ball down the field to some magical solution or to somebody else's problem, instead of saying, how can we all commit to transparency and accountability happening tonight or tomorrow? And how do we show up for those conversations? And how do we participate in them in substantive ways? And I know folks like Kip and Byron and the other members of PCCEP that have been working on this for a long, long time have been attempting to do that. But this team was even potentially going to be shut down by lack of support from the mayor's office like a year or two ago. So how do we continue to show those, and how do we continue to make that happen? And how do we show up instead of, again, saying it's going to happen later? It can happen tonight. You can answer those questions tonight. You came to a meeting about the rapid response team without the information about the rapid response team. And to me, that seems like another missed opportunity.
At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the co-chairs to go ahead and wrap us up with some what's next.
Kip or Samir, me or whoever. I had settlement for looking at truth and reconciliation next. Well, it was going to be something that we're going to be talking about, trying to get a recommendation out of that. And the police shootings that's been happening the last couple of months. So, have you had for that?
Yeah, hi. So that's definitely something that may be on the agenda. I think for the following meeting.
Yes.
Right, yeah. The meeting that is coming up next week of the Community Engagement Subcommittee, I think Odelia might be able to speak more to the agenda for that one, but it is a Community Engagement Subcommittee. So Odelia, would you like to give a preview?
Yeah. For sure. So I think a lot of it will actually be a pretty good continuation of this conversation, and kind of having more of a focus on the protests that have been happening over the past few months and like the escalations at PSU and the protests. And I don't think we were fully set on a guest yet, but I think we were hoping to have someone from perhaps the ACLU or a similar organization. So that will be sent out soon, but it's hopefully just going to be a continuation of this conversation.
Thanks, Afrida. And then as Byron mentioned earlier in the meeting, the other event coming up this month is the Brain Injury Forum on the 26th. And we can go on to this. Yeah, thanks. The last slide there. Kip basically said all this, so I won't reiterate it, but please do go to the website, give public comment in advance of future meetings, and sign up for email updates from PCCEP. All the info is on the screen. We are right at I just went to 8:00. We're at 8:01 and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.
Recording stopped. Thank you so much, Chief Day, Stephanie, and Heidi. Thank you all. Jared, good to see you.
Thank you. Thanks for the conversations. Appreciate them.
Nice night, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Oh, good night.